Every so often I like to talk about tools and supplies that I recommend for new woodworkers, as is the case with all of the videos on woodworking for mere mortals. My focus is on beginners. I feel like entry-level content and advice can either be difficult to find or just kind of a challenge to determine whether it's reliable or not. I've pretty much stayed in my lane on this channel over the years, and the set of tools in my shop represents a typical home hobbyist woodworker. Keep in mind that I'm focused on traditional power tool woodworking, the kind that most entry-level woodworkers pursue. It's the easiest, fastest, and most efficient way to get building furniture and other things without a steep learning curve while still remaining relatively affordable. Power tool woodworking is the method used by 95% of home workshops. I kind of like to think of myself as sort of the gateway drug into woodworking. I'm here to help with the basics and fundamentals, and then at some point you may want to spread your wings and fly away, buy more elaborate stationary tools, explore digital woodworking, buy a CNC machine, or even experiment with hand tool woodworking. So in this video, I want to give you an idea of the tools you'll need if you're just starting out and let you know what I think are essential. Also, when I said relatively inexpensive earlier, I want to point out that woodworking is not a cheap hobby, but it doesn't have to be outrageously expensive either. My strategy has always been to just buy the tools that I need when I need them, usually for a specific task, and then just use them for years and years and years. Most of the tools in my shop are well over a decade old. Some are 20 years old or even older. So think about how that initial cost is spread out over the years. And if you're patient and persistent, you can get some of the best and most affordable tools at flea markets, garage sales, or online marketplaces. I highly recommend doing this. Tools age really well, and you can often pick up an older tool that's just as good as a brand new one for half the price. I'm not going to be recommending any brands or model numbers or whatever in this video because honestly, I'm not really much of a tool guy. I don't collect tools, I just use tools. However, I do maintain a list of all of the essential tools you'll need to get started for less than $1,000. I've just updated it for 2026 also. This is a great resource if you're thinking about getting started in this hobby and you just don't know where to begin. You can download that free guide over at mytoollist.com. I'll have more on that later, including my new bare minimum list for under $300 and my newest edition, a much needed tool guide for European woodworkers. As a channel focused on beginning woodworking, I sometimes hear from people who are surprised to discover that I recommend a table saw as the most important tool for any hobbyist. There's a common misconception from non-woodworkers who think that the entry point into woodworking is hand tools. Oddly, most hand tool woodworkers get into that style of woodworking after gaining experience with power tools. Hand tool woodworking is a specialized niche that requires far more skill and patience. And once you really get into it, it can actually be just as expensive as power tool woodworking. I use an older Porter Cable table saw that they don't make these anymore. That was gifted to me by a bunch of viewers back in 2012. It replaced my little skill saw that I used for 10 years prior to that. It actually served me very well for a long time. And you can pick up a little saw like that for just a little more than $200 today. Anyway, a table saw is the most versatile cutting tool in the shop. There are hardly any projects I make that don't get run through this tool at some point. At its core, a table saw allows you to make straight, accurate cuts two different ways. You can use the rip fence for cutting boards along their length, and you can use a miter gauge for cross-cutting boards, cutting them against their grain. This is only the beginning. There's almost no limit to the types of cuts you can make with a table saw, except one. You can't make curved cuts with it. For that, you're gonna need a jigsaw, one of the handiest tools to own and perfect for making curved cuts. It's inexpensive and you can buy different types of blades for different materials and different types of cuts. It's almost always used for freehand cutting. You can run it along a straight edge and get pretty straight cuts, but they're usually not good enough for joining boards together with other boards. The blade is just it just isn't rigid and stable enough for that kind of cut. A better solution for getting straight cuts is a circular saw. It's designed to make fast, reasonably accurate cuts. It's great for rough construction projects like making a fence or even making a workbench, but I think it's too aggressive for making the fine, precise cuts that you need for furniture or other woodworking projects. And there's no way you can use it for cutting small pieces. In my shop, the most important thing I use it for is to break down full sheets of plywood and other materials which are just way too large and unwieldy to cut on my table saw. So I break them down first into smaller pieces with my circular saw, and then I cut them down to their exact sizes on the table saw. It's a pretty good system that I've been using for years. Just remember, for precision, nothing beats a table saw. And the last saw in my arsenal is my miter saw. I suppose the case could be made that it's redundant since I already have a table saw which can make crosscuts, but I find that a miter saw is just so handy, and in some cases it's just a better tool. First of all, it's fast and it's easy. If you need to make a lot of crosscuts, you can set up a stop block and a fence and you just start chopping away, and it's exceptionally appropriate for large, thick boards. For instance, I used it exclusively for building my deck a few years ago. Those long, heavy redwood boards would just be super awkward to try to handle and cut on my table saw. Sometimes it's just handy for making crosscuts without having to disturb the setup that I'm already running on my table saw. And of course, as its name implies, it's handy for making miters. Although, as you gain more experience, you may find that a table saw can give you more control and accuracy. I guess in general, when it comes to saws, I feel like I can get much better results when I move the wood through the saw rather than try to move the saw through the wood. And a table saw is the only saw here that allows you to do that. But honestly, a miter saw is also just less intimidating than a table saw. So you might want to get a miter saw first. In fact, the first 2 projects in my beginning woodworking course, the Weekend Woodworker, are made using just a miter saw. Probably the most often used tools in my shop are my drill and driver. I use the drill for boring holes and the impact driver for driving screws. I mean, you can absolutely get by with just the drill alone. It can do both things. And that's exactly what I did for many years. But trust me on this one, once you get an impact driver, you'll wonder how you ever got along without it. In fact, most brands sell the 2 as a kit. An impact driver just drives screws so much more efficiently and easily. And by having both tools, you can drill holes and drive screws without having to switch bits. That could really help with workflow. Honestly, even if you're not a woodworker, it's just really worth owning a drill and driver. They just come in so handy for all sorts of just DIY tasks and repair jobs around the house. Also, make sure to get a set of drill and driver bits with them. Woodworking involves spending a lot of time smoothing wood, and my go-to here is my random orbit sander. There's all kinds of sanders for all sorts of use cases, but the random orbit sander is just the generalist tool that'll take care of almost any kind of sanding that you need. And for those special cases, just using a sheet of sandpaper and sanding by hand is usually good enough. The random orbit sander spins, but its base also moves around in a random motion, which prevents circular sanding marks and scratches. You can quickly swap out different grits of sandpaper, which attach using Velcro. Sanding can be a time-consuming, laborious process, but it's critical for the finished quality of every project. And the random orbit sander is the best tool for getting great results while making the process less of a hassle. So in my new 2026 tool guide, the cost of all of these power tools I just talked about comes to $731. And one of the things that I'm really happy about in this 2026 edition is that I've included my pick for solid upgrades. In case you're interested in stepping it up a notch, but still without breaking the bank. Make sure you check that out. But of course, you're still gonna need other stuff to start woodworking, so let's dive into some essential accessories. Okay, well, you can probably get by for a while with just a broom and a dustpan in your shop. I highly suggest getting a shop vac. Every power tool has a dust collection port that you can attach a hose to and suck away most of the sawdust and chips that it creates. And I use the vacuum to continually sweep the floor and work surfaces. It's easy for sawdust to accumulate and just track all over the house. So get control over sawdust. A lot of new woodworkers are surprised to learn that most projects are held together with glue rather than mechanical fasteners. And that means you're gonna need clamps to hold the pieces together while the glue dries. There's a gazillion different types of clamps for all different purposes, but to get started, I suggest starting with just a few. Bar clamps. They're also called F-style clamps. These are simple and useful for most clamping situations. I use them most of the time in my shop. Depending on the brand and the features, bar clamps can get very pricey though. Start out with two 24-inch clamps like these for $14 each. They're super handy to have around. Times when you need long clamps, the most affordable solution is a pipe clamp. The way this works is you buy these fixtures and they slide onto 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch black pipe. So you can pick this stuff up at a hardware store or home center in all kinds of different lengths. Get a pair of these heads and then swap them out with whatever length of pipe that you need for the project. One clamp that's completely optional, but I think it's really essential, I mention it all the time, is a strap clamp. I find myself using this for everything. So many woodworking projects, from boxes to cabinets to bookcases to picture frames. They're all square, and this thing is a fantastic way to pull all 4 sides together with equal pressure all at once. You can pick up one of these for about 25 bucks. Oh, and of course you're gonna need glue, so I recommend getting some Titebond 2. It's the only wood glue I've used for decades. It's stronger than the wood itself, and it's very rare that I need a different type of adhesive. 2 more tools for squaring things up are a combination square used for drawing cut lines and squaring things up. I also think it's important to have a framing square for lining things up and testing larger pieces to see if they're square. Get a measuring tape, either a 12-foot or maybe a 16-foot one. I feel like anything larger than that is just too bulky for woodworking projects. I particularly like this one from Fast Cap that you can read from either edge, so it works if you're pulling it from the left or pulling it from the right. Okay, let's talk about personal protection. I probably should have started with this because these are all just non-negotiable. Protect your eyes with safety glasses or goggles. Protect your hearing with something like these headphones. Protect your lungs with a dust mask with replaceable filters. I don't think you need me to elaborate on these. Just get them and use them. Just don't be dumb. You can also check out my award-winning safety video before you start any woodworking. And there's lots of methods for protecting your fingers from spinning blades, but I found nothing as effective as the Microjig Gripper push block. Longtime viewers will know that I've been using this thing since 2011. But the best part is it also helps you achieve much cleaner, more accurate cuts by controlling the wood better. If you want to just dip your toe into some woodworking and just see if it's something you might like, check out my bare minimum starter kit included in my tool guide. This is all new for 2026. It's a list of tools that you can get for less than $300 that you can use to build your first workbench. I really like this edition because it's a way to dabble in the basics of woodworking without spending too much. And you'll build a really practical workbench that you can use for all kinds of things. I call it the basic mobile workbench, and thousands of people have built one. I really think a solid workbench should be the first project any beginner should make because you're going to need it for every other project moving forward. I've also included a free set of plans for the BMW in the tool guide. Again, get my free guide to getting started over at mytoollist.com. Finally, let's be real, woodworking is not the cheapest hobby you could choose, but I also want to reiterate that it doesn't have to be as expensive as a lot of woodworking channels would have you believe. I've built my entire career demonstrating how anyone can build really cool projects without any experience, without a lot of space, and without being a billionaire. Woodworking isn't complicated, but it's a fun, rewarding hobby that'll always challenge you. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody.